Jonah never knew that one small no to God would lead him into the darkest place he had ever been. Long ago, in a quiet land where people listened closely for God's voice, there lived a man named Jonah, the son of Amittai. Jonah was not a bad man. He knew God. He prayed. He understood God's ways. People even respected him because he was known as a prophet, someone who heard from God and spoke his words to others. But knowing God and obeying God are not always the same thing. One ordinary day, when Jonah least expected it, the word of the Lord came to him. It was not a whisper from people. It was not advice from friends. It was not a thought Jonah created in his own mind. It was God's voice, clear and strong. Jonah, the Lord said, get up. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it. Tell them that their wickedness has come up before me. Nineveh was not just any city. It was big. It was powerful. And it was full of people who did not fear God. The people of Nineveh were known for their cruelty. They hurt others without shame. They lived as if God did not exist. Their sins rose like a loud cry to heaven, and God could no longer ignore it. God wanted to give them a warning. God wanted to give them a chance to change. And God chose Jonah to deliver that message. But the moment Jonah heard the name Nineveh, his heart sank. Why Nineveh, he thought. Why those people? Why me? Jonah knew something about God that troubled him deeply. God was merciful. God was kind. God forgave people who truly repented. Jonah was afraid that if he went to Nineveh and warned them, they might change. And if they changed, God might forgive them. And Jonah did not think they deserved forgiveness. So instead of obeying God, Jonah made a decision that many people still make today. He decided to run away. Not away from Nineveh alone, but away from God. Jonah turned his back on the direction God gave him and went the opposite way. Instead of heading east toward Nineveh, he went down to the seaport city of Joppa. Every step Jonah took felt heavy, but he kept going. At Joppa, he found a ship preparing to sail to a faraway place called Tarshish. Tarshish was known as one of the farthest places a man could go in those days. To Jonah, it felt like the perfect hiding place. If I go far enough, Jonah thought, maybe God will leave me alone. He paid the fare without hesitation. He climbed aboard the ship. And as the ship pushed away from the shore, Jonah felt a strange relief. He believed he had escaped. But Jonah forgot something important. You can run from an assignment? But you cannot run from the God who gave it. As the ship moved deeper into the open sea, the sky began to change. The calm air turned restless. Dark clouds gathered quickly, as if the heavens themselves were angry. Then, without warning, the Lord sent a great wind upon the sea. The wind howled like a wild beast. The waves rose higher and higher. The ship rocked violently from side to side. Soon, a terrifying storm surrounded them. The sailors, strong men who had faced many storms, were suddenly afraid. This was no ordinary storm. It felt different. It felt personal. Each sailor cried out to his own God, shouting prayers through the roaring wind. They threw their precious cargo into the sea, hoping to lighten the ship and save their lives. Panic filled the deck. But deep inside the ship, far away from the chaos, Jonah was asleep. While others fought for their lives, Jonah lay down and slept deeply, as though nothing was happening. The captain of the ship finally found him. He shook Jonah awake and shouted, "How can you sleep at a time like this? Get up. Call on your God. Maybe he will notice us, and we will not die." Jonah opened his eyes, and in that moment, he knew. This storm was not random. This storm was not natural. This storm was chasing him. And Jonah was about to learn a painful truth. Disobedience does not only affect the one who runs, it affects everyone around them. The storm did not calm down. In fact, it grew worse. The waves rose like walls around the ship, crashing down with terrifying force. The wind screamed through the sails, threatening to tear them apart. The sailors were no longer just afraid, they were desperate. They had prayed. They had thrown cargo away. They had done everything they knew how to do. Yet nothing worked. One of the sailors shouted above the noise, "This is not a normal storm." Another replied, "Someone here has angered a god." Fear spread among them like fire. Then one man said something that made them all pause. "Let us cast lots," he said, "so we may know who is responsible for this disaster." In those days, casting lots was a way people believed the truth would be revealed. And with shaking hands, the sailors agreed. They gathered together on the wet deck. The wind howled around them. The sea roared beneath them. They cast the lots. And when the result was revealed, every eye turned to Jonah. Silence fell, brief, but heavy. The storm still raged, but something else was louder now. The truth. The sailors surrounded Jonah and began to question him urgently. "Tell us," they demanded. "Who are you? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? Which people do you belong to?" Their voices were not cruel, but afraid. Jonah swallowed hard. There was no hiding anymore. He took a deep breath and spoke words that made their fear even greater. "I am a Hebrew," Jonah said, his voice low. "And I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." The moment he said this, terror filled their hearts. "The God who made the sea," they whispered. Then they understood. If Jonah's God made the sea, then this storm was not an accident. It was intentional. They looked at Jonah in horror and cried out, "What have you done?" They already knew the answer. Jonah had told them earlier that he was running away from the Lord. Running. From the God who controls the wind. From the God who commands the waves. From the God who sees everywhere. The sea grew even more violent, as if responding to their fear. Water poured into the ship. The wood groaned under pressure. Death felt close. The sailors turned to Jonah again, their voices shaking. "What should we do to you?" they asked. "So that the sea will calm down for us?" Jonah looked around at the men whose lives were in danger because of him. For the first time since he ran away, Jonah stopped fighting the truth. He spoke quietly, yet firmly. "Pick me up," he said, "and throw me into the sea." The sailors stared at him. "Throw you into the sea?" one of them shouted. "That would kill you." But Jonah continued. "The sea will become calm. I know this storm is my fault." Guilt filled the hearts of the sailors. They did not want Jonah's blood on their hands. So instead of throwing him overboard, they did their best to row back toward land. They strained with all their strength. Their arms burned with pain. Sweat and rain mixed on their faces. But the sea would not allow it. The waves grew even wilder. The wind pushed them backward. The storm refused to release them. At last, they understood something very important. They could not fight what God had decided. So the sailors did something they had never done before. They cried out, not to their own gods, but to the Lord, Jonah's God. "Please, Lord," they prayed. "Do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us guilty for his death. You are the Lord, and you have done as you pleased." With trembling hands, they lifted Jonah. The sea roared around them. Then they threw him into the water. The moment Jonah's body hit the sea, the wind stopped. The waves settled. The storm disappeared. The sea became calm, as if nothing had ever happened. The sailors stood frozen in awe. They had just witnessed the power of the true God. Right there on the quiet deck, these men feared the Lord greatly. They offered sacrifices to him and made vows, promising to honor the God who rules the sea. Meanwhile, beneath the surface of the calm waters, Jonah sank. Down. Deeper. Into darkness. It looked like the end. But God was not finished. Because when Jonah reached the depths where no man could survive, the Lord prepared a great fish. And in one powerful moment, Jonah was swallowed whole. Jonah expected one thing when he hit the sea: death. The water closed over him. Darkness surrounded him. His body sank deeper and deeper, pulled down by the weight of his fear and regret. The silence of the deep wrapped around him like a cold blanket. Jonah knew this was the end. But God had prepared something Jonah never imagined. Out of the dark waters came a huge fish, sent by the Lord himself. In one swift moment, Jonah was swallowed whole. Not crushed. Not destroyed. But kept alive. Inside the belly of the fish, Jonah found himself in a place no man would ever choose, a place of complete darkness. There was no light. No direction. No escape. Only Jonah. And his thoughts. And his God. For the first time since he ran from God, Jonah could no longer distract himself. He could no longer hide behind distance or movement. There was nowhere else to go. This dark place became Jonah's quiet place. And it was there, inside the fish, that Jonah finally prayed. Not a proud prayer. Not a rushed prayer. But a broken one. From the depths of his pain, Jonah cried out to the Lord his God. "In my distress," Jonah prayed, "I called to you, Lord, and you answered me." Jonah remembered how he had ignored God's voice. He remembered the ship, the storm, the fear in the sailors' eyes. And now, here he was, alive, but trapped. From the depths of the grave, Jonah continued, "I cried for help, and you listened to my voice." Jonah realized something powerful. Even in the darkest place? Even after disobedience? Even after running away? God still listened. Jonah spoke honestly to God. "You hurled me into the deep," he said. "Into the heart of the seas. The currents surrounded me. All your waves and breakers passed over me." Jonah knew this was not punishment alone, it was correction. God had not abandoned him. God had stopped him. Then Jonah said words filled with pain and hope at the same time. "I said, I am banished from your sight. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple." That sentence changed everything. Jonah finally understood what running had cost him. Peace. Purpose. Direction. The belly of the fish became a mirror. It showed Jonah who he really was when pride was stripped away. He remembered God's mercy. He remembered God's calling. And deep inside that dark place, Jonah chose humility. Those 3 days and 3 nights were not wasted. They were days of reflection. Days of repentance. Days of surrender. Jonah learned a lesson many people learn the hard way. You may run from God's will. But God's will not run from you. And when Jonah finally finished praying, truly praying, something shifted. The same God who sent the storm, the same God who prepared the fish, was now ready to give Jonah another chance. Because God is not just the God of judgment. He is also the God of second chances. Inside the belly of the great fish, Jonah's prayer did not disappear into the darkness. It reached heaven. God heard every word. God saw Jonah's broken heart. God knew Jonah was finally ready. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah had no choice but to wait. He could not move forward. He could not go backward. He could only surrender. And surrender is often where real change begins. When Jonah had finished praying, when his heart was no longer fighting God's will, the Lord spoke to the fish. The great fish swam toward dry land. Then, in a moment that Jonah would never forget, the fish opened its mouth and vomited Jonah onto the shore. Jonah lay there on the sand, wet, weak, and shaken. But alive. The sun touched his skin again. Fresh air filled his lungs. The sound of waves was no longer a threat. Jonah had been rescued, not because he deserved it, but because God is merciful. He slowly stood up, covered in seaweed and shame. The man who had boarded the ship was not the same man who stood on that shore. That Jonah was proud. That Jonah was afraid of obedience. This Jonah was humbled. Then, once again, the word of the Lord came to Jonah. Not in anger. Not with rejection. But with grace. Get up, God said. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. God did not change the assignment. God changed the man. This time, Jonah did not argue. He did not run. He did not delay. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord. Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to walk through it. The streets were busy. The people were loud. Life went on as usual. They did not know that judgment was near. They did not know God had seen their wickedness. They did not know a prophet was walking among them. Jonah entered the city and began to speak. He did not preach long sermons. He did not try to impress anyone. He simply delivered God's message. 40 more days, Jonah cried, and Nineveh will be overturned. The words echoed through the streets. Something unexpected happened. The people listened. From the greatest to the least, fear of the Lord spread through the city. The king himself heard the message, and instead of becoming angry, he humbled himself. He stepped down from his throne. He removed his royal robe. He sat in ashes. Then the king made a decree. No one was to eat or drink. Everyone was to fast. Everyone was to cry out to God. Everyone was to turn away from evil and violence. Who knows, the king said. God may yet relent and show compassion. And God did. When God saw their repentance, real repentance, he showed mercy. He did not bring destruction. He did not destroy the city. He forgave them. Jonah had delivered the message. But what God did next revealed something deeper. Because Jonah was not happy. Instead of rejoicing, Jonah became angry. And that anger would teach him one final lesson about the heart of God. Jonah stood outside Nineveh, looking down at the city. The streets were quiet now. The people had listened. They had humbled themselves before God. They had turned from their evil ways. And Jonah? Jonah was angry. He had run from God, endured the storm, been swallowed by a fish, and finally obeyed. Yet, now that God's mercy was shown to the people of Nineveh, Jonah could not celebrate. This is not fair, he muttered. I knew what would happen. I ran, I suffered, I obeyed, and yet God forgives them? They don't deserve it. God looked at Jonah and asked gently, Jonah, is it right for you to be angry? Jonah sighed. He wanted to argue, but he knew deep down that God was right. He was tired, worn, and humbled. God continued, using an example Jonah would never forget. Look at this plant, God said. A leafy vine had grown overnight beside Jonah, providing shade from the burning sun. Jonah was happy for the shade, but the next morning, God caused the vine to wither. Jonah was upset. I am angry enough to die. Jonah said. God replied, you feel pity for a plant you did not grow, that came and went in a single night. And yet you are angry that I should show mercy to Nineveh, that great city, with more than 120,000 people who cannot tell right from wrong, and many animals as well? Should I not have compassion on them? Jonah understood then. God's heart is bigger than his own pride. God's mercy is wider than human anger. God cares more for people than for punishment. Jonah had learned a final, unforgettable truth. God's love never fails. His mercy is for all who turn to him. Even those we think are undeserving. Jonah returned home a changed man, not just a prophet who delivered a warning, but a man who had truly seen God's heart. And the people of Nineveh? They were given a second chance. They had been warned, they had listened, and they had repented. Their city, their lives, their future, all spared by God's mercy. The story of Jonah reminds us, running from God only brings storms. God hears the cries of the brokenhearted. True obedience comes from a humble heart. Mercy is greater than judgment, and forgiveness is greater than pride. Jonah's journey from fear to flight, from storm to fish, from despair to obedience shows that no one is beyond God's reach. Even when we feel lost, trapped, or undeserving, God is waiting to guide us back. And that is the power of God's mercy. And from that day on, Jonah carried with him a heart forever changed, a reminder that no matter how far we run, God's love will always find us, guide us, and give us a second chance. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more inspiring Christian stories.